Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to Sea Power, Naval Combat in the Missile Age. So as mentioned in yesterday's Emergency World of Warships video, this was supposed to be yesterday's video. But the scenario that I was playing was giving me all kinds of problems. Which is fine, I mean they shouldn't all be easy, and this one was anything but. This is one of the hardest scenarios currently available. It's called All Your Guam or Belong to Us. The Soviet Union are attempting to take the US territory of Guam in the Pacific in order to establish a foothold in the Pacific and exert naval dominance, and obviously USA would rather they didn't. So as usual, let's start by taking a look at the forces under our command. We're going to pause the game and see what's what. We do have a fairly powerful force at our disposal, starting with a pair of EA-6 Prowler electronic warfare aircraft. These guys are going to be very, very useful. They have absolutely no weapons, but they have good radar, which is running, and they have a comprehensive jamming suite, which is what's going to be very useful here. They are, of course, not the only tools available to us. Bringing up the rear, not yet on station, is an E-3 Sentry, airborne early warning aircraft. It is running both its air search and surface search radar, but it's a good couple of 100 miles behind the force. Speaking of the force, we also have the USS Grayling. This is a Sturgeon-class attack submarine, and it is currently trailing the hostile force. The Grayling is also going to be exceptionally useful. I'm going to order it up to periscope depth. We're going to pop up the ESM mast in order to get some intelligence on the force that we're facing. We also have a pair of B-52s. Now, these guys are armed with 12 harpoons each. So that's a total of 24. This is basically going to be my primary striking force. That's not all we have, of course. We also have a surface action group, Task Force Bravo, led by the Spruance-class destroyer, the Paul F. Foster. It's armed with RIM-7 Sea Sparrows. They're dual-purpose missiles that can be used in the anti-air or the anti-surface role, but they only have a range of 18 nautical miles. She's also armed with Harpoons, which in the surface launch variant have a 65 nautical mile range. The second ship in the task force is a Kuntz-class destroyer, the USS McDonough. It's armed with the extended range version of the SM-1 standard missile, which has a 35 nautical mile range, thanks to the rocket booster, and of course also comes with Harpoon. Next we have the slightly less capable USS Bruton, which is a Knox-class frigate. This is primarily a anti-submarine warfare platform, although it does have the Sea Sparrow, the RIM-7F, which unfortunately does have a very short range and is basically a close-in missile system. Then we have the USS Harry E. Yarnell, which is a Leahy-class missile cruiser. No Harpoon, unfortunately, but it does have the RIM-2F Terrier, which has a very, very good 40 nautical mile surface-to-air engagement range. No Harpoon, sadly, but it is a decent anti-air warfare platform. However, it's not without its limitations. You can see the number of tracking channels. Basically, each radar can only track and engage one incoming target at a time, although it does have more than the one radar. Oh, what I wouldn't give for a Ticonderoga-class Aegis cruiser in this scenario, but, well, we don't have any. The final ship in the class force is the USS Jowett, which is a Belknap-class missile cruiser. Again, it comes with the RIM-2F Terrier. Again, it is not armed with Harpoons, and again, its tracking sensors suffer the same limitations as the Harry E. Yarnell, with a limited number of targets that it can actually track and engage at the same time. Having a look at the sensor systems on the formation leader, the Paul F. Foster here, again, it's pretty much the same deal. And of course, the Soviets were entirely aware of this. They understood the limitations of the forces they were facing, which is why when the Soviets launch a missile at you, they don't just launch one. They overwhelm and saturate your defenses, which is the whole reason why the Ticonderoga-class missile cruisers with the Aegis battle management and radar systems were developed in the first place, to be able to engage multiple incoming hostile targets at the same time. I'm going to get a helicopter airborne, and I am turning all of my radars on. Oh, but Jingles, isn't that going to give away your position? Well, not necessarily. I mean, we're a good 500 nautical miles away from the enemy surface action group, so they're not going to detect my air search radar from this range. Unless, of course, they've got something that I don't know about, lurking around a little bit closer, like, for example, the submarine with an ESM mast up, in which case, yeah. But as with anything else, you kind of have to weigh your priorities, because the kind of missile threat posed by a Soviet surface action group is pretty substantial, and if I don't have my radars on, I'm not going to know they're coming. Speaking of having somebody lurking around at periscope depth with an ESM mast up, that's exactly what I'm intending to do here with the USS Grayling. He's already got passive sonar contacts on something out here. Let's take a look. What do we know about these contacts? Wait, what? No, don't visual ID it. Oh my god, what do you do? That was my fault. Hang on, let me fix that. Get the Grayling back to what it's supposed to be doing, and then we'll take a closer look at these sonar contacts. Had to take direct control there and countermand the order that I just gave it. Okay, so what do we know? So the Grayling, with its passive sonar, has detected, well, not an awful lot. Don't know much. Not from this range. What's this? Yeah, this could basically be anything. It's heard something running an engine. However, if we come up to periscope depth and pop up the ESM mast, we'll get a lot more information. Yep, well, that should demonstrate the importance of ELINT, or electronic intelligence. That's firmed up a whole bunch of contacts, and also identified them as hostile. What? How can you classify something as hostile just by passive sonar? Well, you'd be surprised at what you can tell just by listening. Both NATO and the Warsaw Pact had comprehensive libraries of the acoustic signatures of, well, basically anything that they could get within range of a submarine. And we can tell just by the noise that these diesel engines are making that these are either Alligator or Rapucha class transports. This is the invasion force. There's 2 of them. What's this? There's 3. 3 that we know of. But they're not going to be unescorted. So we don't know what this is. Passive sonar has revealed that whatever it is running a gas turbine power plant, propelling 2 shafts, each with a 4-bladed propeller. I'm positive that this is also a hostile contact. This is going to be one of the escorts. It's probably one of these frigates or destroyers. So I'm happy to classify that as hostile. Pretty sure it's not going to be the only escort though. But the second the Grayling gets its ESM mast up, we should be able to get some more information, especially if any of them are transmitting on radar. Meanwhile, the USS Bruton's just spotted its Sea Sprite heli. Oh, I should probably explain. In this context, spotted doesn't mean it sees its Sea Sprite helicopter. Obviously it sees it, it's the one launching it. It means it is on the spot, it's ready to launch. And it has in fact launched. So we're going to send it out ahead of Task Force Bravo and start laying a pattern of selling boys. And you know what? We're going to turn the surface search radar on as well. I mean, if there is a submarine out there spotting us, which in this context, yes, does mean looking at us, we might get lucky and catch its periscope on surface search radar. So the Grayling is still shadowing and gathering intelligence on the invasion force. There's something here, however, that we have some very, very faint ESM contacts on. The E3, the AWACS, has almost reached its patrol point, and it's still about 500 nautical miles out, but, well, it should soon start to actually get something on its surface search radar, which will help firm up whatever it is out there that we're facing. The Grayling has now gathered so much information, purely passively, that we are now able to positively identify the individual platforms in this invasion force. The transports are Rapuchas, not Alligators, and the one escort that we've so far managed to detect is a Cashin class destroyer. Pretty sure it's not alone though. Patrol helicopter's gotten its first sonar buoy away, and it's detected precisely zip with its surface search radar, so I'm going to drop it back down to 200 feet. I'm not anticipating much of an air threat here. We're in the middle of the Pacific, the Soviet don't have a huge amount of air bases, and there's no carrier present, at least none that we're aware of. Actually, I'd kind of prefer it if they did have an aircraft carrier, one of the Kievs maybe, because, well, the kind of aircraft carried on board one of those things, Yak-38s, they're kind of shit. We would easily be able to deal with a Soviet carrier air attack. It's the missiles carried by their escorts that keep me awake at night. Oh, hello. Somebody just turned their radar on. The Prowlers have just detected Soviet surface search radar. That's the HeadNet and the Pop Group radar, NATO call signs, which has positively identified that as a Kirov class frigate. Now that's an anti-submarine warfare vessel, technically. So, might be thinking, well, not so much of a threat. Well, yeah, but the Soviets like to stack missiles on absolutely... Oh my god. That's a Kirov class battle cruiser. Holy shit. I mean, the Kirov, even though it's an anti-submarine warfare platform, does have the SSN-14 Silex missile launchers, which were primarily designed to launch torpedoes at very, very long range, but can also be used in the anti-surface role. The Kirov, however, is a dedicated missile platform. And yeah, they've got some helicopters out in front of the force as well, probably looking for submarines. Fortunately, they're not searching for submarines behind the force, so the USS Grayling could be in trouble. But yeah, the Kirov, that thing is a monster. Of the many different weapon systems that it carries, its most dangerous are its 20 SSN-19 shipwreck surface-to-surface missiles. That one ship alone carries enough missiles to overwhelm the missile defences of our task force. But two can play in that game, because I have a pair of B-52s that are each armed with 12 Harpoons. Now, I'm going to need to be careful about how I do this, because the B-52s can launch their Harpoons from, I think, 56 or 58 nautical miles. And the primary surface-to-air missile batteries of the Kirov, and probably whatever other ships are out there with it, I mean, we've identified a Krivac, but it's probably got something else escorting it too. It wouldn't just have a single escort. Is the SAN-6 Grumble surface-to-air missile, which in this time period only has a range of 50 nautical miles. So the B-52 should be able to successfully get their missiles away without being engaged. And even if they stray into engagement range, they're so far away that as soon as they turn to head for their egress point, they'll be once again safely out of range. The thing about B-52s though, they're not very subtle. Stealth bombers, they are not. So the Soviets will be tracking the B-52s right now. And the second they launch their Harpoons, they will also detect the launch. This is where the Prowlers come in. There's not a lot we can do to prevent the Soviets from knowing that we've just launched a brace of Harpoons at them. But we can degrade their ability to deal with those Harpoons by jamming their radars. The Buffs are almost within attack range. We're going to salvo fire. There are 3 contacts down there, the Kirov and its 2 escorts. We have 24 Harpoons. So we're going to salvo fire 8 each. Now I can't launch more than 8 at a time, but that's not a problem. As soon as they're away, we can just salvo fire the remaining 4 from each B-52. So each target is getting 8 missiles. Hopefully that'll be enough. But it might not. That Soviet battle group has some pretty stiff air defences. The Kirov alone has 96 SAN-6 Grumble surface-to-air missiles. I mean, it can't control or even launch all 96 at the same time, but it can put up enough to give us problems, and that's not all it has. It also carries 40 SAN-4 Gecko short-range surface-to-air missiles, has 8 30mm Gatling-style close-in gun systems, all radar-guided as well as a comprehensive electronic warfare suite of its own, and 2 decoy launchers. So we're going to attempt to overwhelm its defences, and that's just the Kirov, by the way. It's not out there alone. It has 2 escorts with it who have their own missile defence systems. But in order to try to stack the odds in our favour, we're going to start jamming them with the Prowlers. So the way radar jamming works, it's actually fairly straightforward. You see, the radar operators on board that Soviet battle group have 100% detected the missile launch. And those missiles are right now being tracked. But even though within seconds they're going to get to within theoretical surface-to-air missile engagement range, they are dropping down to sea-skimming altitude, so they're about to lose radar contact with them. They will reacquire them, however, once they get close enough. But how close is, well, it's determined by a number of factors. See, the Harpoon's a sea-skimming missile. which means that in a best case scenario, the Soviet battle group is going to reacquire them and then be able to start shooting them down, or at least trying to, when they appear over the radar horizon. Now, at sea, under ideal circumstances, and this does kind of look like ideal circumstances, that's at a maximum possible range of 20 nautical miles. The actual visual horizon at sea level is around about 10 or 11 miles, but the radar systems are located at the tallest point in the ship, right at the top of the mainmast or the foremast, so they get to see a bit further. So we'll say 20 nautical miles. But if I'm jamming their radars, and again, you know, this depends on a lot of factors, but I can probably reduce the effective engagement distance down to 10 nautical miles before the Soviets' radars are able to burn through the jamming and actually lock on to the Harpoons as targets. See, the way jamming works, it's actually pretty simple. The Prowlers all know exactly what bandwidths and frequencies the Soviet air search radars operate on, and the Soviets have exactly the same information on us. And knowing that information, all they're basically doing is just broadcasting noise on those frequencies and bandwidths. So the effect that this has for the unfortunate sensor operator on the receiving end is you're manning your radar system, you're transmitting a radar pulse. That radar pulse radiates outward in the direction that the radar's pointing, and what you're looking for is the radar return from anything that the radar makes contact with. So there's a whole transmit and receive thing going on, and it's the receive thing that's important, because the strength of that radar return depends on, well, a number of things: the power output of the radar, the size of the contact that you're looking for, and how much background noise is being transmitted by any jamming aircraft. You see, the jamming basically prevents you from being able to discriminate between an actual radar return and all of the background noise that the jammer's putting out. And a Harpoon's a fairly small target and isn't going to give you a huge radar return in the first place. Nevertheless, at some point, the air search radars looking for those missiles are going to be able to burn through all of that background noise generated by the jamming, and are going to be able to determine, and therefore start engaging, what is an actual radar contact and what's just noise generated by the Prowlers. The question is, how close are the Harpoons going to be able to get before they can do that? What is that Cresta doing, by the way? That's a Cresta-class missile cruiser, also entirely capable of taking care of itself. It looks like it's trying to maintain station on the Kirov, but it doesn't know which way to go. I imagine the captain of the Kirov is probably exchanging some extremely stern words with the captain of the Cresta right now. Sort yourself out. But yeah. If not for the Prowlers jamming the defensive radars here, these guys would probably already be launching missiles against the Harpoons, because they've just popped over the radar horizon, and yet ain't nobody launching missiles, because the jamming from the Prowlers is being effective. So let's see how close the Harpoons get. And remember, there's 24 of these things incoming. Let's see how close there they go. Or they haven't actually started engaging yet, but they have seen them. They just can't get a lock on them. Okay, the Kirov's managed to burn through the jamming and is getting its missiles. That's a lot of missiles. And at about a range of 10 nautical miles. But the Cresta, for one reason or another, it cannot get a target lock on the incoming Harpoons. The Kirov's putting up some defences though. Shots coming in from the Krivak to the rear as well. He's getting his own missiles away. Okay, the Cresta has finally managed to beat the jamming, but way too late. They've got some successful intercepts though, and their own electronic countermeasures are spoofing the tracking heads on some of these Harpoons, forcing them to miss. You can see the close-in weapon system going up. That means the Harpoon is in the top-down engagement row, and it's taken a hit. The Kirov's taken a hit. The Cresta's taken. They're all hit. And there's still a couple of Harpoons incoming. 2 more Harpoons, which they look like they've both hit. And it looks like the Cresta is already sinking. Yeah, the Cresta is done. I'm fairly sure the Krivak isn't going to survive that. How about the Kirov though? I mean, it took multiple hits. I'm reasonably confident that we've taken care of the strike force. They're probably sinking. They just haven't actually sunk yet. So these three... Oh, there's a secondary explosion on the Kirov. Yeah, these three guys are done. But this Soviet Surface Action Group, this was sort of like the strike force. Their job was to smash through the American defences so that the second group to the rear, which is the amphibious landing force with its own escorts, would be able to conduct an unopposed landing on Guam. Well, we've prevented that from happening, but we still have to deal with the amphibious landing force. These guys, I mean, these are good kills, I'm certainly happy about it, but my targets are actually landing ships. Now, Task Force Bravo, my own surface action group, is probably 3 or 4 hours away from getting within range of the amphibious assault force and being able to launch its own harpoons. But I do have something that's a little bit closer. Yeah, you thought I'd forgotten about the USS Grayling. We're going to drop the ESM mast and drop down below the layer and go all ahead full. That's theoretically 20 knots, although if you have a look you'll notice that she's not going to go any faster than 5 or 6, at least not initially, not until she gets down to depth. They introduced a feature into Sea Power in a recent patch where a submarine, regardless of the helm orders that you give, will not exceed cavitation speed if that option is turned on. And cavitation speed, which is the speed at which a submarine goes where the prop starts to generate cavitation bubbles, which is extremely noisy and will get you picked up by passive sonar. That depends on how fast the submarine is going and what depth it's at. It's all a factor of water pressure. It gets kind of complicated, but basically the deeper you are, the faster you can go without causing cavitation. That amphibious assault group is sailing at a speed of 16 knots. And if I get down below the layer at a depth of around 350 feet, I can come up to full ahead, which is about 20-21 knots without cavitating and giving away my position. So the Grayling is going to be able to catch up to those guys. And the Grayling can launch harpoons of its own. It actually has 8, although it can only launch 4 at once because it only has 4 torpedo tubes. And I'm not done with the Prowlers yet because I want to use their jamming pods to assist the USS Grayling in successfully landing the maximum possible number of harpoons on target as well. So I've ordered the 2 Prowlers to circle around the Soviet amphibious assault force. It's important that the jammers are radiating from the same direction as the threat. Because if the missiles are coming at you from a bearing of, say, 270 degrees, then the jamming has to be coming from that rough bearing as well. Otherwise, it's going to be more or less completely ineffective. So the Grayling is close to a distance of about 16 nautical miles, which is probably a bit too close for a harpoon launch, actually. Well, it's not too close for a launch. I mean, the harpoons are going to be entirely capable of hitting the targets from that distance. It's just that from that close in, they're going to see the harpoon launch. If I'd launched the harpoons from over the radar horizon, say about 25 nautical miles away, the harpoons would still be in range, but the Soviet radars might not detect the launch, particularly if I'm operating the Prowlers and jamming their radars. The thing is, the Grayling only has 8 harpoons. It's not going to be able to take out the entire amphibious landing force. And I need to be a lot closer than this to be able to engage them with torpedoes. So, this basically means the Prowlers have got a lot of heavy lifting to do, but you've already seen how effective they can be. Right, that's 4 harpoons away. I do have another 4, but I can't launch more than 4 at once because the Grayling only has 4 torpedo tubes and it takes time to reload those torpedo tubes with more harpoons, so 4 it is. I've assigned 2 harpoons to 2 each of the 3 transports. I don't care about the escorts. I don't have to sink the escorts. Sinking them would be nice, but I do need to sink the transports. And look at how close these harpoons got, thanks to the Prowlers jamming, before they started being engaged. That is a lot of defensive fire, but no missiles. This harpoon's already gone into a top-down engagement, and yep, we've got one. let's have a quick look at the other two. And I think the second Harpoon is also going to hit the target. This one's actually bypassing the transport. It's going for one of the escorts. Yeah, that's the thing. Regardless of the targets that you set, the Harpoon does have a mind of its own, and it will go for whatever it can hit. And oh, it missed. Looks like it got spoofed by electronic countermeasures. It went for the chaff cloud. Although there was a hit there. Did look like a hit. We hit something. I think we hit one of the escorts. And the other Harpoon missed and ended up getting intercepted. So that's... well, nobody's sinking just yet. We hit something. Oh no, we hit something. I think that was another escort. I mean, I didn't have radar contact on whatever it was that the final Harpoon hit, but it definitely hit something. So that's one of the three transports definitely hit. That thing took 2 Harpoons. So that one's a write-off. It hasn't sunk yet, but it is going to. And I think, I mean, we definitely scored a Harpoon hit on something else, and possibly all 4 of them hit something. At the third Harpoon, I'm not sure whether it hit one of the escorts or it got intercepted right before it hit. But either way, that's not too bad. Well, now we just need to wait for the Grayling to reload its tubes, and then we can do it again. So we've definitely sunk 2 targets. One of the transports and one of the escorts. Don't know what that escort was. We never identified it. So, same as before, got 4 Harpoons left, 2 per transport. There are still 2 surviving transports. The good news is that with 1 escort less, there's going to be less defensive fire directed against these 4 Harpoons. And we do still have the Prowlers on station jamming their radars. So this should be more successful. If I can get those 2 transports, this is a win. Once again, note how close these Harpoons actually get before we see any kind of defensive response. And that's all down at the jamming from the Prowlers. They're 10 nautical miles away. Nothing. Well over the radar horizon. Probably about 5 nautical miles before we start seeing any kind of incoming fire. Yep, there it is. And again, it's gunfire. No missile launchers that I've been able to see. You can see them trying to engage the first set of Harpoons over there, going for one of the transports. So there's the chaff. Still no missiles. Lots of shooting, but no missiles, not yet. There's the close-in weapon system. It doesn't look like it's hit anything. This one's going for another target. Harpoon's gone into top-down attack mode. And is that going to be a hit? Surely that's a hit. How about this one? This also gone into top-down attack mode. Somebody just got a missile away, too little too late. He's already been hit. That's fantastic. That's 2 hits on at least 1 transport. And that one's going to sink. You don't survive 2 Harpoons. How did the other one do? No, it's fine. Well, that's a bit of a bummer, because now I'm out of Harpoons. Well, I'm not. I mean, Task Force Bravo still has a couple of ships with Harpoons, but they're hours away from being able to engage. The Grayling is only about 16 nautical miles away, though. And the Grayling has torpedoes. So I order the Grayling to dive and get down as deep as she can, and then go all ahead flank. At maximum depth, she can do 25 knots without cavitating and becoming noisy. With that Soviet landing force being limited to 16 knots, which is the speed of the transport, that means the Grayling, it's going to take time, but is going to be able to catch up to get to within effective launch range of a Mark 48 torpedoes, which have a speed of 50 knots. Again, 4 tubes, 4 torpedoes, 2 per target. It's probably overkill for one of the transports, but, well, since there is only 1 transport left, and there's probably now, since there are now no transports left, I can afford to spare a couple of torpedoes for one of the escorts. Which may mean that the Sovereign here is about to have a very bad day, but it is not without anti-torpedo defences. Yeah, there it is. That's the RBU anti-submarine rocket launcher. It doesn't just have noisemakers, it has active torpedo defences. It just mortared and destroyed the Mark 48. Still got 1 torpedo in the water though. It's going after the cash-in. Cashin's just launched a noisemaker, but, well, yeah, day late and a dollar short. You've been hit, my son. In fact, you've been sunk. So that means we have destroyed the entire Soviet strike force and invasion force, with the exception of the one escort, the Sovereign. We've still got one Mark 48 in the water that looks like it's gone pitbull and is trying to find a target. But I'm basically going to have to rinse and repeat here and try to catch up. I mean, you can see that the Sovereign is inside torpedo range, but the torpedoes are going to take a hell of a long time to get there, at which point the Sovereign will be outside of torpedo range, so we're going to have to dive and sprint again. But hey, it's only time. Oh, we've still got the Prowlers on station with their drop tanks. I mean, they can loiter around for hours, and they have their surface search radar on. It's not like the Sovereign is going to be able to hide. There is, however, a problem with this plan, because the Sovereign is no longer restricted to a speed of 16 knots. We've sunk the things it was escorting. The Sovereign is now doing 21 knots, and the Grayling's best speed is 25. And even though the Mark 48 has a speed of 50 knots, with the Sovereign hauling ass like that, it probably means I need to get the Grayling within about 7 or 8 nautical miles before I launch, in order to give the Mark 48s a chance of catching the Sovereign before it exceeds their maximum range. And that's going to take the Grayling hours. It looks like Task Force Bravo is actually going to get to do something today. Starting with shooting down that Russian helicopter who is almost certainly providing the Sovereign with targeting information. Here's where we run into a bit of a problem though, because that helicopter is providing the Sovereign with targeting information. Because my Harpoons, I mean, the Harpoon's a good missile. You've seen how effective it can be. And it's not a short-range missile, but it's not an especially long-range missile either. Do you know what the Soviets have? Lots and lots and lots of very, very long-range missiles. I mean, with the exception of the Tomahawk cruise missile, most Soviet warships fielded missiles that had ranges vastly superior to something like the Harpoon. The Sovereign may only be a destroyer, but it is armed with the SSN-22 Sunburn anti-shipping missile. It carries 8 of them. This is a supersonic missile with a range of 250 kilometers. The second I got spotted by that helicopter, the Sovereign emptied its magazines at Task Force Bravo. And it doesn't matter if I shoot the helicopter down, and I am going to shoot the helicopter down. Like the Harpoon, the Sunburn is entirely capable of looking after itself and making its own decisions. As well as an inertial guidance system, it also has terminal active radar guidance. It's a fire and forget missile, and it is really, really fast. At sea level, it'll do Mach 2.2, or about 3 times faster than a Harpoon. And with a weapon coming at you at that speed, does not leave an awful lot of time for you to defend yourself. I mean, the only good news here is that we see them coming, but we can't even start engaging them. I mean, we're going to take care of the helicopter, but it's not going to make any difference at this point. We can't even start engaging them with some of the ships until they get to within 40 nautical miles. And you want to know the really, really bad news? Right before they get to within engagement range of our Sea Terriers, which is about 40 nautical miles, they all drop down and start sea skimming. So they're now over the radar horizon. I can't see them. I know they're coming, but there's nothing I can do about it until they get so close that the radar can see them again. But of course, at that speed and at that range, there's not an awful lot I can do about it. The Sea Sparrows should be able to start engaging them soon, but they get within 3.5 nautical miles and they're too close to engage with the more advanced and more capable SM-1s. Remember, this is what one Soviet destroyer can do with these SSN-22s. I don't think the Paul F. Foster is going to have a very, very good day. He's engaging with Seaways, which means they're seconds away from impact. He has actually managed to spoof or intercept a couple. I mean, but, well, When you're being targeted by SSN-22s, it only takes one. The only piece of good news here, and they have actually managed to intercept a couple of those missiles, but, well, yeah. The only piece of good news is that the Sovereign launched all of them at the Paul F. Foster, which is really bad news for the Paul F. Foster, but it's really, really good news for the other 4 ships in the task force. Well, actually, there is more good news. The Sovereign blown his load. He only carries 8. Unfortunately, the Paul F. Foster was one of the only ships in the force that actually carries harpoons. Although the other ships in the force are armed with things like RIM-7s and SM-1 standard missiles, and while they are primarily surface-to-air missiles, they do have a dual engagement role. You can use them against surface targets, they're just not as effective, and they certainly don't have the same range when employed in the anti-shipping role, but you can use them. It's going to take a while for us to get to within range though. And it's here where I suffered from my first major rush of shit to the brain. Because I was thinking, well, it's still going to take hours for the surface action group to actually get to within engagement range and finish off that final Sovereign. And the USS Grayling, the Sturgeon-class attack boat, could still catch up and quite safely take it out with its remaining Mark 48 torpedoes. And while I was focusing on the Grayling, giving it orders to do just that, and doing its best speed of 25 knots, trying to catch up with the Sovereign that was doing 21 knots and heading directly away from it, I advanced time and didn't realise that in my haste I had only given the USS Bruton orders to close in and engage the Sovereign. And the Bruton is just a Knox-class frigate. Knox-class frigates aren't very good. Not only that, the Sovereign managed to score a lucky hit with its first barrage, well, its first barrage that hit, from its 130mm naval guns, and it knocked out the Bruton's fire control radar, which meant that with our SPS-10 surface search radar knocked out from a lucky hit, the Knox couldn't actually engage the Sovereign with its RIM-7 missiles, and was reduced to a single 5-inch gun. And the Sovereign has 4 130mm guns in 2 turrets, and yeah, it's using them, which is not great news for the USS Bruton. So I did lose the USS Bruton, and that was 100% my own fault, but I did manage to at least get the other ships in the force close enough to use their own surface-to-air missiles in the surface engagement mode, and overwhelm the Sovereign's defences. Of course, if you're using a surface-to-air missile in the surface engagement mode, it doesn't have a huge warhead, so one hit is usually not going to be enough, but that's fine. I've got dozens. I can only, well, each ship can only control 2 at a time, but each successful hit on the target is reducing the capability of the target to defend itself by knocking out things like target acquisition radar, maybe gun systems, although you can see its countermeasures are still working. But there's no way... Oh, and that one's actually gone for the chaff. Well, what can I say? Missiles are expensive, but it's not my money. There's plenty more where they came from. So with a few more salvos fired by the remaining ships in Task Force Bravo, that looked like a secondary... yeah, the secondary explosion has finished the Sovereign off, so even though this RIM-2F did get spoofed by the chaff cloud, it doesn't matter. The Sovereign's gone down. And that was the last ship in the Soviet invasion force heading for Guam. So despite some avoidable losses caused by me being a dumbass, that was a decisive victory. But hang on, Jingles, the other day you said this scenario was kicking your ass. You said you'd played it for 8 hours over and over and over, and you just kept getting whooped. That actually seemed fairly simple, aside from one rush of shit to the brain. I mean, you got a decisive victory without too many problems. Well, I did this time, yes. You see, the thing about the scenarios in Sea Power is they contain variables. They don't always play out the same way. You remember what happened with just one Sovereign armed with just 8 SSN-22s the second I got spotted by a Russian helicopter? Well, imagine what would happen to Task Force Bravo if, say for example, they had gotten spotted by a lurking Alpha-class submarine while the Kirov battle group was still alive. Well, you don't have to imagine it. I can show you. So this is my first attempt at this scenario. and passive sonar picked up a lurking Alpha-class submarine. I, of course, instantly vectored a helo to go over there and deal with him. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. The thing is, the submarine is a variable. It's not always guaranteed to be present in this scenario. In the playthrough that you just saw, it wasn't. And I made sure it wasn't, because I immediately vectored search helos over there to drop sonar buoys and look for it. But the first couple of times I played, it was, providing targeting information for the Kirov battle group in the same way that I was doing with the USS Grayling. Those are SSN-19 shipwreck anti-shipping missiles. In my opinion, they're even worse than the SSN-22 sunburns that the Sovereign was armed with. And when I say worse, I mean worse than me. The only piece of good news here is that the SSN-19 isn't as fast as the SSN-22 that the Sovereign was firing at us earlier. I mean, it's still fast. It's still supersonic. It's still twice as fast as a Harpoon. It's just not 3 to 4 times as fast as a Harpoon. And that really is the only piece of good news. Because as far as its onboard electronics are concerned, it is downright evil. I'm very hastily turning all of my radars on and setting weapons free in air defense mode, because I initially tried to do this scenario by staying radar and radio silent. And obviously with the submarine spotting you, that does no good whatsoever. And since most, if not all, of my surface-to-air missiles are semi-active radar homers, you have to have the radar on to give the missiles something to home in on. So radar's on, boys. It's not going to make much difference. The SSN-19 has a number of tricks up its sleeve. I mean, as well as being a supersonic anti-shipping missile. Once it gets close enough, it will switch over from inertial guidance systems to its own onboard active radar seeker, which you can try to jam, but I wouldn't recommend it, because if you do that, it will instead home in on the radar jammer. And that's not all it does. We'll talk more about what an evil bag of tricks this thing is when we find out whether or not the USS Paul Foster is going to survive. Oh, who are we kidding? I mean, we're looking at the perspective from the USS McDonough here, who's trying to defend the flagship. Yeah, I mean, missiles are out, and there is one successful intercept, but, well, with an SSN-19, it really only takes one. There goes the Sea Whiz. Yep, no, you're done. That's an instant sinking from one SSN-19 hit on the USS Paul F. Foster. There's another one coming in, though. Well, there is, and there isn't. There's another one that we can see, but there's a lot more coming in. Because the other thing that the SSN-19 does, and remember, the Soviets never launched just one missile at you. They know your capabilities just as well as we know theirs. They know if there are this many ships in the force, and the force consists of this particular class of ships, then they know exactly how many targets you can successfully defend against at once, or even attempt to defend against at once. So they just overwhelm your missile defences, in the same way that I did with the B-52s against the Kirov battle group. But what the SSN-19 does is when you pick up one of them, it's deliberately flying at altitude in order to maintain radar contact with you, the target, and it is relaying that targeting information to all of the SSN-19s that you can't see. Do you notice there? Radar had contact on a whole bunch of SSN-19s, and then we only had one, and then we successfully intercepted one, and then suddenly there's another one that wasn't there earlier. Well, it was there earlier, we just couldn't see it on radar because it was down at sea level. When we intercepted the one that was up top, one of the others down at sea level rose up to altitude in order to take over, providing targeting and tracking information to the others. And oh shit, here they are. Well, you can see them all now, Jingles, shoot them down. Well, I can't actually see them all down. That's electronic warfare letting me know that a whole bunch of SSN-19s have just turned their active radar homers on. So that's an approximate location. Oh shit, this is going to hurt. I mean, we've got the missiles out. We're probably going to intercept some, but you saw what happened to the USS Paul Foster. If only one of these things gets through, somebody's going to have a really, really bad day. Did I mention they're supersonic? And remember, if they have something spotting you, the Soviets can do this from 250 kilometers away. You can see why I was struggling with this scenario, can't you? And it's all because of that one variable. The 50-50 chance every time you fire this scenario up, whether or not the Soviet task force is going to have that Alpha class submarine shadowing you. If they do, this isn't an impossible scenario to complete, but you are not doing it without losses. Significant losses. You're probably going to lose most, if not all, of Task Force Bravo. You can still complete the scenario with the B-52s and the Prowlers and the submarine, the USS Grayling, but there's an excellent chance you're going to lose the entire surface action group, so you won't be getting no decisive victory. You're probably thinking, well, why don't you just try it again, but this time without MCOM, turn all of your radars on right at the start. Yeah, I tried that, and the thing is, SSN-19 doesn't care if you have your radars on. It's going to get you anyway. It really is a case, and this is actually true of naval combat in the missile range. He who shoots first usually wins. The problem, of course, is that the Soviets can shoot first from a hell of a lot further away than we could. Spotting the enemy first is important, and MCON does play a role in that, but spotting the enemy first doesn't do you an awful lot of good if you lack the means to actually attack them. And with their missiles outraging my missiles by a factor of 3 to 1, or more, actually more like 5 to 1, God. It didn't really matter that I spotted them first, because they were able to strike first. But hey, nobody said war was fair. So that was the scenario that had me pulling, well, I'd say pulling my hair out, but I don't have any hair. If I had any hair, that would have been the scenario, causing me to pull all of my hair out for the last day or so. And I was only able to get a decisive victory, even though I did take at least one avoidable loss, but I was only able to get that decisive victory because of the variables in play within this scenario. Not all of the mission scenarios in Sea Power play out exactly the same way every time you play them, which adds to the replayability, of course. But if you get unlucky, and the Soviets have that Alpha, and you get spotted right at the start, your surface ships are in for a really, really exciting time, because Soviet missiles do not mess around. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've maybe learned a thing or two. And maybe it's given you something to talk about in the comments. If you have any questions, feel free. I'll do my best to address them, and if I don't, I'm sure somebody will. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.